That's cool. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, from wherever in the world you join us. Welcome back to RCI TV for the final qualifying session of the RCI Endurance World Tour. It's round 6 at Suzuka. It's a blaring 35 degrees ambient, 30 degrees C on track out there today. And we have at least 20 cars joining us this evening for the final qualifying session of the championship. My name is Ryan Gill. I will be your lead for this evening. We've got Nick Setnick behind the cameras, and joining me, it's the first time it's going to be the Ryan and Ryan show, it's Ryan Mawson. How are you doing?
Yes, hello Ryan as well. Not too bad. Great to be here and to see some of the final shootouts now, some of the last points available on the table for these teams. And well, even looking in free practice, we can already see everyone scrambling for it. It's going to be a tricky one, though. Suzuka, historically a taxing circuit on the drivers. And, well, let's see how many people dare take the liberties through the likes of the Degmas.
Yeah, it is quite a difficult circuit anyway. There is a lack of grip at Suzuka at the best of times. And, well, with the conditions that we have out here today, it's not going to be easy for a lot of the drivers out there. But at the top, coming towards the end of practice at the moment, we've got two Bentleys setting the fastest times, and setting the fastest times by a margin as well. Joe Mccauley and Matthias Egger for the CDA NOP and Orion race team are leading the charge so far in practice. Cody Pride just sitting in third place there for the Porsche. And you will notice that we do have a couple of pro teams missing at the moment. We will get a couple more in before qualifying begins. But, I mean, Ryan, I think around here is a track that I think historically is Cody Pride. Bit of a sketchy entry into the pit lane. I think this circuit has been predominantly known in the past to be a very Mercedes or Porsche favoured circuit, but we see the Bentleys up at the top of the timing sheets at the moment. I mean, going into the qualifying session, would you have expected that?
To be honest, actually, no. Normally, what a lot of people say is that, if you want to win at Suzuka, well, you need an AMG. Other cars that have historically been really good, the Aston Martins, Porsches, and weirdly, you do get a couple of oddballs that with the IGTC bop come alive, like the BMW. I mean, currently running around in P5 is at 411, Martin Schumacher piloting that car, but it just sort of comes alive here. And, well, like I said, normally I wouldn't pick a Bentley as pole, but you do have to tip your hats to the drivers of those, Joe Mccauley and Matthias Egger, probably some of the fastest Bentley drivers going.
Definitely so, and I mean, not just fastest Bentley drivers, but some of the fastest drivers in ACC in general, and fantastic to see the Bentley up towards the top of the field. And of course, this qualifying session and Super Pole that we're going to be hosting here today is just the prequel to the final round of the championship, which will be kicking off in a week's time next Saturday, the 10 hours of Suzuka to round out the Endurance World Tour season. And we will be having a second season of the World Tour, but that won't be until 2022. So the 2021 version of our Endurance World Tour will conclude next week at Suzuka. And, it's been a thoroughly enjoyable championship so far. There's been some particularly fantastic moments, but I think amongst, myself and a lot of the drivers, I think everyone's, kind of ready to put this championship behind them now.
Yeah, there are certain teams that will really be happy to see that final checkered flag and to call it all over. I mean, we have had just some great races, some great tracks that we've had the pleasure to race at, and it is incredibly taxing by the time you've got to the end of this. And, well, it ain't over yet. The 10 hours of Suzuka. I mean, I don't know about you, but after I've done an hour around here, I'm actually starting to feel a bit sort of, oof, this is tiring, and you're so focused everywhere on this circuit. But as you said, the lack of grip, you've got to keep an eye on your tires, the fuel loads, through the S's. It's just so easy to make a mistake. You can never really take your mind off the driving. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that by the end of this, there'll be some celebrations, maybe a couple of teams thinking what can or what could have been, but for the top runners, I think it'll be the final hurrah, won't it?
It definitely will, and I think you mentioned a big point about this circuit. You know, you said doing an hour around here can feel quite taxing. Doing 10 hours is quite the marathon, and it is one of the more demanding circuits from, you know, should we say, a fitness level in sim racing. I know there's often the comparison said that it's not quite the same, obviously, as driving a real car, and it isn't, but you know, there are still circuits that take it out of you on a physical level, and you know, this is definitely one of those circuits. It has a lot of twisty technical sections to it, and the straights, I mean, we have the back straight and the main straight, but they're really not that long. You really don't get too much time to have a breather around here.
Well, as a driver, I know that it's not long. The main straight is not really long enough. If you need to set your pit stop up, you're often coming onto it. You do a few adjustments, and then you're back driving. But yeah, through the S's, the Degners, especially if you are one of the teams that maybe have a high force direct drive wheel, that is very vicious on you. And the curbs, you know, they push back on you. They push you around. And by the end of a lap, you are really sort of thinking, oof. And then, like I say, you come across the start, you've got it all to do again. And that's even if you've got perfect conditions. It then becomes another mental game if you have to start thinking, if the track is fast, what's the weather going to do? I mean, Suzuka, we've seen it before. The weather here can be a little bit unpredictable sometimes if Mother Nature wants to be.
Well, we've definitely had unpredictable weather so far in the Endurance World Tour. It's kind of just a staple now of RCI races and endurance races in particular. But I believe, judging by our forecast, we are expecting sunny skies out here today for qualifying. And I'm sure a lot of the drivers are going to be enjoying that because, of course, we had a fairly wet Monza in qualifying. And then, of course, we had plenty of rain at Paul Ricard as well. And of course, the 24 hours of Kyalami, we can't forget, that had some rain in it to spice it up. I think the weather over the course of that 24 hours is absolutely fantastic. But we'll reserve our judgment for next week's weather, and we will focus on the now. And 1 minute left of practice here. And between Joe Mccauley and Fulvio Barrazzini for the CDA NOP and the Orion race team, Vincent Lebreck in the number 12 McLaren has managed to put himself between the Bentleys.
Yeah, another car to watch out for on the McLarens. Another car that, when I've talked to people before about it, they've sort of said that, it doesn't have what it takes at Suzuka, and some people sort of write it off, but it is really it's a car that suits a particular driver. If you can really drive the McLaren, you can trust the aero that it will give you, and you trust that it will hang on through the corners. I've seen some absolutely monstrous times before, but as I said, hats off to those drivers, because I do not do the downforce things very well. I'm used to my big Bentley, which is more like piloting an ocean liner than a precision GT car.
I can definitely relate to that one. And as practice comes to an end, the qualifying session, or the final live qualifying session for the Endurance World Tour is go. The green lights are out, drivers making their way down the pit lane and now onto the circuit. So for any of you that are unfamiliar with how the qualifying and Super Pole works around here, well, it's going to be a 30-minute qualifying session, and then the top 10 overall will move on to a one-lap Super Pole session, and they should be going in reverse order to where they qualified in the qualifying session. So it should be P10 from qualifying goes first, and then all the way through to P1 goes last. So 30 minutes then, Ryan, and it's 30 minutes for these guys to take all of that practice that they've done over the past hour and try and put it into the books and see if they can get into that top 10. We have a few teams not partaking in qualifying this week. Only 20 teams here for the start of qualifying, so there's a lot of chances for some of these silver drivers to make their way into the top 10.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And historically, the Super Bowl is always such a great watch. We've seen some great upsets in Super Bowl before, where the qualifying has been monumentally close. We're talking, hundreds, thousands of seconds before. Especially my one that I will always remember was Kyle Army. How close that qualifying was just immense. And then the Super Bowl, it is such a big pressure on the drivers. You have one lap. If you have an invalidation, that's it, you are finishing, or you're starting, well, P10 at least. If you have a wobble, there goes your time. It is just so hard. So I'm expecting to see people really, really trying to push to get into the top 10, and we might then see a little bit of a safer lap in the Super Bowl.
Well, here is Cody Pride. He was the first driver out on the circuit for PPR Esports, and he will take us over the line to start the first flying lap of the qualifying session. So let's go on board then with the Porsche down towards the aptly named first corner here at Suzuka. Carries so much pace through these corners. Ride the curb on the inside, go as wide as you dare, don't touch the grass, and then into the Snake S's. Such a difficult sequence of corners to get right consistently. You have to carry as high a gear as you can. Third gear for Cody Pride at this point in time. You'll see some drivers shift down to second. Cody Pride does shift down to second momentarily, and then up through the Dunlop curbs now. Don't go too wide here. I think Cody Pride just on the limit of what would not ruin his lap time. Now towards the first of the two Degners. Carry as much speed as you can. Maximize the exit of both of these corners. Be careful not to pick up track limits here. Easy to invalidate your lap. And then making his way down towards the hairpin. You'll hear the Real World GT drivers up the TC for this corner. Nothing doing here for Cody Pride. He's all about maximizing the exit from the hairpin and does it fairly well there indeed. Up through 200R. And now down towards the notorious spoon curve. Easy to invalidate your lap. Easy to end up in the wall here as well if you get it wrong. Taking as much speed into the entry, doesn't go too wide in the middle part of the corner, hooks it up for the second apex, and then as wide as he can here without invalidating the lap, on to the back straight now, as he makes his way up to one of the most famous corners in motorsport, 130R. Will there be a slight lift off the gas here for Cody Pride? Looks maybe like a slight lift off, and then fifth gear through the corner, down towards the Casio Triangle chicane. Cut as much of the inside of both of these corners as you can early on the throttle. And then hug the inside line for the shortest run to the line. This is Cody Pride for the first lap of the qualifying session. We'll come up towards the timing line, and what will it be for the little Porsche? It's a 2:0.156. It's the first benchmark to beat from Cody Pride. And we have a couple of drivers crossing the line. Daniel Ferrier in the Audi number 25 will immediately beat it, as does Steele Vason and Vincent Erbrich, a 159.4.
Yeah, and there we go. So now we're really starting to see what the pace of some of these are. And from that onboard, it's a great track to drive, but it's also so scary. There's so many blind corners that from our broadcast cameras, it looks like a nice, open, easy track to see from, but it is just so tentative, especially when you're trying to balance the car on the throttle. The mid-engines, especially with the Porsches being rear-engined and these McLarens, you're just dancing the car on the throttle through all of these corners. And then you've got to be super careful through the Degners. We saw Cody Pride take so much curb there, but that is a risk versus reward. That curb will also very easily spit you off into the gravel trap. And Vincent Erbrich doing it magnificently up to the hairpin. Slight wide there, but I have seen some drivers take this line. It depends on your car, really. If your car does not like to hook up if you take the corner too tight, I've seen drivers go really wide out just to get the better run onto this straight coming up to Spoon Corner. And another historically difficult corner as Vincent Erbrich touches the curb, and that will send him off at Spoon. And that is sort of the mistakes that we expect to see here.
And it's as easy as that, isn't it? It didn't look like a big mistake, and it wasn't really a big mistake, but it was one that forced him to abort the lap. And whilst we were talking over about Vincent Erbrich, Fulvio Barazzini in the Orion race team has sent that Bentley to the top of the timing sheets by 75 thousandths of a second. They're back in the pit lane. And we're looking at Daniel Ferrier, who's just been bumped down to 4th place because Malinowski for Side Max Motorworks has thrown their Audi up into what was 4th place, now 5th, because Maximilian Woolmer for the XL Racing by Renwelton team has thrown their car up into the top 3. And we have, at the moment, 5 different manufacturers in the top 5, and 2 of them in 5th and 6th place are sitting with identical times so far. That's Malinowski and Joe Mccauley.
And you got to feel for Joe Mccauley as well. We've seen this before where because Malinowski ran the time first, he will be the one who keeps the higher place. But we've seen it historically where there has been, I think, the most I ever counted was 4 drivers. And so basically, if you set the same time as P2, if you were the last driver to run that, you're actually P4, and it's just such a difficult moment as Joe Mccauley actually having a little bit of a run out there into Degner 2. We mentioned that, and that is where the invalidation will occur. We'll see what Malinowski can do coming up to the line through 130R. Got to keep that Audi stable, especially through 130R. It will want to rotate around you. And spacing is another thing we didn't really talk about. You can see the 96 just trying to get a little bit of space. Some teams will want to run as close as they can to people in front just to get a little bit of slipstream. But if you know where your car is strong and where you're going to catch people, a lot of times you don't actually want anybody in front of you.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I mean, it can be quite distracting to have a driver in front of you as well. Could potentially hold you up if you catch them up too far. And of course, whilst these cars are nowhere near as, should we say, affected by things like turbulence and dirty air to, say, some of the Formula-type cars, you can still feel an effect through following a car in some of the twisty sections, and, you know, it's not too enjoyable for a lot of these drivers, and it really does come down to, you know, that factor of what will you gain out of following someone closely, and a lot of these guys don't really have anything to gain out of following anyone fairly closely. I was having a look at the practice times that we saw just earlier on in the practice session. Fastest lap in practice, a 1:59.259. So we're under 1/10 of a second away from that already after the first few laps in the qualifying session. I mean, I guess the $1 million question, Ryan, is in qualifying here, probably not going to see it in Superpole. Will we see a 58 today?
Yeah, I mean, in free practice, they were super close to that. And even I didn't think that we would get that. Not with a 35-degree ambient and a 30 track. It really starts to hurt certain cars with the high ambient temperatures. You start losing power. The engines are struggling. But you can't count out what Matthias Egger or Vincent Erbridge can do. Those two seem to be absolutely rocking. And there you go, Malinowski in the 96 off at 130R into the wall. And that was the Audi. That was what I said you had to do. You had to keep that rear end on that car planted. You want it loose to get a little bit more pace, but that is ultimately what will happen to you.
Yeah, kind of just shows the little mistakes that can have big consequences, and obviously these are going to be the little mistakes that they can't afford to make in the race. I mean, a 10-hour race coming up next week. You've got to make sure that these mistakes are ironed out. It's okay to kind of make them in a qualifying session where you've got 30 minutes, you can go back to the pit lane, get the car repaired and get back out there fairly sharpish. But going into Superpole in just over 20 minutes time, and then going into the race next week, you can't afford to make those mistakes or it can easily put you out of the race. I mean, a big crash like that into the wall, you could easily find yourself a lap or two down with the time you'll have to spend in the pit lane, and that's time that is very difficult to get back around here. It's a long circuit, and a lap down here means a lot more than being a lap down at somewhere like Brands Hatch or Misano.
And especially a lap down in the invite split where everyone is so close and everything is so competitive. And I know that is what happened. That what happened to our team at Kyalami. We had a large crash. I think it was early on in the race. We lost a lap, and by the end of it, we had only gained a lap back on about 12 cars, I think, was the amount that we overtook. But it just shows how close everyone was. And Cody Pride into the wall. coming into the first set of the S's. And that's, once again, those curbs are just evil. And I think a lot of these drivers are on quali setups, which will be more of a hold it and hang on type setup than the safe race setup. But they are absolutely terrifying to drive some of these cars.
Yeah, you will find that the setups they're running here today for the likes of Super Pole or qualifying will be very different to the race setups, at least in terms of the safety of them. And seeing Aston Martin off there, that was Maximilian Woolmuth in the number 16 as we continue to watch Vincent Lebreck. There's actually, as I was looking down the timing board, there's actually 2 more drivers that have identical lap times, Ryan. Milton Steele-Vasson in the 962 and Ismael Lebreck in the 333 for the Triple R team. Both of those carrying identical times as well, and they're both in the same class, so that could be a big, big difference for them, depending on which one of those could potentially get through to the Super Pole session. Both of them sitting in 11th and 12th, so they're not quite in Super Pole, but they're just on the edge. So they need to find a bit more time.
Well, we need to find around about 100th of a second, and that will put either of one of those drivers just in front of Daniel Ferrier. And then there's a bit of a gap, so Martin Schumacher in the 411 has got a little bit of breathing room, but with these cars still lapping around, a couple of drivers are still finding time. Like this man here, Vincent Lebreck, puts it up to P1 with a 159.181. That is so close to breaking into that 58. And well, you said, can he do it? I'm sort of now leaning towards yes.
Yeah, 59.181 by Vincent Lebreck, so close, and of course that does beat the times we saw in the practice session earlier. We've got Harry Conway just in the chat saying that he saw a few 59.1s in the practice server. And well, we always say that the drivers, they leave the best until it really matters, and well, this is where it does matter the most. To get yourself into that Super Pole session, we won't be seeing anywhere near a 58, I don't imagine. In Super Pole, you'd have to come out with an extraordinary lap on a first try to hit a 58 in these conditions. But with just over 16 minutes to go, it is still possible, and with the quality that we have out here in this field, it's definitely doable here today. But Vincent Lebreck throws down the gauntlet and says to Matthias Egger in the 126, can you do any better? Meanwhile, the lone BMW that's been on the grid this season for the Invitational split is working its way around and is in the top 10 at this point in time, and that's fantastic to see.
Yeah, it is such a strange car, though, is the BMW. In real life, it's had quite a good spell of racing. In ACC, I remember it never really had an edge anywhere. It was always just a car that was sort of running around the back, but Suzuka is really where it seems to shine. And Spa, sort of a couple of tracks where you can really stretch its legs, you can really wind up those turbos. I mean, at Suzuka, having driven this car here once before, it feels just like they've taken the restrictors off and they've just let the engine run free. When the turbos kick on, it is immense. It's also probably one of my most favorite cars to watch going around, just because of the turbo flutter every time you let off and shift down those gears.
Yeah, it is a fantastic car, and we don't really see too much of it in ACC, unfortunately. But if you do want to see some BMW action going on, well, glad to say that our European Masters Championship that starts the next coming Monday, so just in 2 days' time, that will actually feature quite a few BMWs on the grid. I think we've got 7 or 8 in the Pro class. Which is absolutely phenomenal to see, and that's going to be very, very interesting. It's only European cars. Brexit has hit hard. There's no McLarens, no Astons, no Bentleys. It's purely just the should we say European Union cars, I guess. But it's going to be fantastic to see some of those cars out in a championship, and the first race kicks off, or the first round, sorry, kicks off on Monday night. So be sure to put that one in your book. And of course, if you are liking the qualifying stream at the moment, be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you are new around here. We have racing every week, 2 to 3 races per week usually. And we're going to be looking... Oh, Ooh, as Maximilian Wilmoth just gets caught on the curb a bit, and that's going to be his lap done for now, and he'll return to the pit lane as we switch to Tom Pottage. He's found himself up in 4th place, but just going back on the stream skirt, we do try and fit as many races as we can in throughout the week, and I think we're fairly close to being able to host 5 races per week during the weekdays, so 1 race every single day, and quite the accomplishment that would be. Back to qualifying, and Vincent Lebreck still leads the way from Matthias Egger, Maximilian Wilmoth, Tom Pottage, and Cody Pride in the top 5. Malinowski and Joe Macaulay in 6th and 7th. Darren King has snuck into 8th place. Martin Schumacher in 9th, and Daniel Ferrier is closing out the Superpole spots right now.
Yeah, the 777 going great guns, and so far they've had a really, really good season in silver. A lot of times they have had a couple of races where they've been caught up in disasters, but we've always sort of had that joke that we were, for the 777, we were the sister car to them, we were the pro car, and we were consistently outdone by the silver car. We were always sort of joking with them that, hey, we should change it round, we can be the silver car, and you guys are obviously got the pace over us. But so far, yeah, sitting in P4 overall, or P2 in silver class. But that lap around will not be an improvement. That's a 2-minute .9. Just trying to find any amount of time around here, but it is so tricky in these conditions.
I imagine it's quite tricky as well, because if you set a particularly strong banker lap for the first lap of the session, it can be quite difficult to then go on and beat that. It's one of the, should we say, downsides to having a very strong start to your qualifying session. If your first couple of laps are very, very good, you might find yourself, well, chasing a lap time that you can't beat, or if you can beat, you just can't really hook it all up together in the space of 1 lap. And I know that's a problem that quite a few drivers have. I myself am not particularly good at qualifying, but that's one of the problems I seem to have, which is I seem to set I peak very early in the qualifying session, and then I spend the rest of it just trying to chase a lap time that isn't there.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar, really. I'll often do better in the race. I think the problem that you have with that is that a lot of it is the mental game, which some of these drivers, these are the type of people who battle tooth and nail for hours on end with a driver right behind them and don't get phased. So they're as cool as ice. But I will often set a time, and then if you see in the corner of your eye that delta going red, you start to panic and try and catch up to that, which ultimately leads to a ruined lap time. And you got to keep your head calm around here, especially at Suzuka. And Cody Pride coming through the last chicane now in that Porsche. Looked very strong in the early set of qualifying. Currently down in P5, but what can they do coming to the line? It's a long old drag race in that Porsche. Not one of the cars that we would say is the great master of speed in a straight line. And that lap will not be. That is an out lap.
Yeah, it was an out lap from Cody Pride, and he will start now on his flying lap. And, well, we were talking about a couple of drivers not being here for the start of the qualifying session. We've just had another team show up, and, I mean, it's better late than never, but the current championship leaders, the 191 Racing Line Motorsport team, have shown up with 10 minutes of qualifying remaining. And, well, they're one of the contenders to get into Superpole, so let's see, 10 minutes to go. The championship leaders are here, and they've got to find their way into the top 10. Don't think it will be particularly difficult, considering the talent that is in that car, but we'll have to wait and see, and what a shock that would be for the final race of the season if the championship leaders didn't make it into the top 10 for Superpole.
Yeah, I mean, nothing like a bit of pressure. 9 minutes left to go, and by the time you've done the outlap and found the space, you've only got maybe 2 to 3 laps at an absolute maximum. But yeah, throwing that car out of the truck, quickly getting everything on, and racing around. We'll see what Marek Shins has got in that Ferrari. As it says, shown great pace all season. So I would be surprised if they were out of the top 10. But with how everyone's lapping around at the minute, a couple of more cars going up. Joe Macaulay in the 899 up to 4th. So people are really showing what they got now in the last few minutes.
Yeah, Joe Mccauley improving on a time that it's taken him, I think, around 15 minutes to beat. And that's one of those things I mentioned earlier, that if you set a very, very good banker lap, it can be very difficult to beat that. But Joe Mccauley doing the work, and I believe he was the driver that did the qualifying and super pole at Kyalami for the CDA NOP team as well. So makes sense to put him back in the car here for Suzuka. Currently chasing down, I think that was Akos Gietvan in the 194. Bentley just trying to make their way past them, and Joe Macaulay will now be looking to try and get his foot down and see if he can gain any more time out of that lap. A 159.460 from Joe Macaulay. Doesn't need to go any quicker, but obviously he would like to be one of the last runners in the Super Pole session, because there's nothing nice about going first in the Super Pole session. Everyone watching you, and everyone will be treating your lap time as the benchmark, and kind of often find that the drivers that go later in the Super Pole session tend to do better just because they know where the limits are.
Yeah, well, you get a bit more information, don't you? You can watch people go through, and you know then either what the track is doing, what you've got to beat, and sometimes people will just say that if you, for example, if you ran almost last in Super Pole and you know that you could do a really good time, but it might be a little bit risky, they might just say keep it safe, we'll come home in a good position. Or if you know that everyone's so close, the response might just be gun it, and we'll see what happens. And that is another thing that you don't want to do. Darren King running wide out of Dunlop does well to keep it actually in a straight line. Normally, once you've got two wheels off the circuit there into that gravel, it just spits the car off and it unsettles the balance. But keeping it on the road, and currently sitting in 9th. But if you look, the 333 of Ismael Lebreck is breathing down his neck for that 9th place.
Definitely is breathing down his neck as well, and Ismael Lebreck, who did a fantastic qualifying at Monza for the Triple R team, to put them very high up the order, will be looking to try and repeat that as best he can. At the moment, just sneaking into the top 10, and I was speaking about the championship leaders. What if they didn't qualify in the top 10 for the final race of the season? Well, Marek Shins has done a lap on the board. He's 1.3 seconds off of the fastest time at this stage. He's, well, is it about 9/10 of a second almost off of the Super Pole, well, the minimum time required to get into Super Pole. The Ferrari has been back to the pit lane. They are back out on the track, but I can only see this car getting 2 fast laps in minimum. So Marek Shins, a bit of pressure on his plate for the championship leaders.
Yeah, and partly as well, once you've got this late into the session, looking at the track map, there's a lot of time everyone sort of found their own little gap, and you've got to try find space to do your lap. It can be quite tricky, and we only have 22 cars, yes, but when people want a couple of second gap, the track gets full very fast. Malinowski coming through 130R, this time not taking the unexpected detour into the wall and through the last chicane. Can he get any improvement? He is still within Super Pole, but you always want to just secure it a little bit more, don't you? A drag race up to line in that V10 powered Audi. It will be an improvement. Up to 5th goes Malinowski with a 59.526.
Improves by just about 1/10 of a second. And speaking of improvements, we've seen the number 25 Audi of Daniel Ferrier for the Pink Performance team improve. That has knocked Darren King down to 10th and Ismael Lebreck down into 11th. So the Triple R McLaren now out of the top 10 at this stage. Ismael Lebreck needs to find 31 thousandths of a second to beat Darren King, assuming that Darren King or nobody else can improve their lap time to bump them out of the top 10. It's going to be so close towards the last few moments of this qualifying session, 4 minutes to go. And I have noticed, didn't notice this just earlier on, but Matthias Egger has improved in the 1-2-6, 6,000ths between themselves and Vincent Erbrich. And I think that will probably be qualifying done for the 1-2-6, and they'll be starting to prepare for Super Bowl.
You would think so. That is just incredibly close. It's so tempting sometimes as Darren King attempts to hit the abort button on the lap to go back into the pits, head first into that wall. It's sort of, by the time you've already passed the entry lane, it's kind of too late to hit the pits, but nevertheless attempted it anyway. But yeah, by the time you've got that close to the driver in front of you, it's always tempting to go out again. You think, I can get that. It's 6,000ths. What is that on a lap? And well, you could be doing that for the next 45 minutes.
Yeah, at this point in time, the Orion race team, they know that they don't really need to improve too much at this point. They're probably going to be going second last in the Super Bowl, so they don't really need to worry about too much, and I'm sure that they won't mind if it's last or second last, whatever the order is. Meanwhile, Marek Shins needs to improve on his lap time. He's currently in 19th place. The championship leaders mentioned this just before. They don't have too much longer left. He comes through the Casio Triangle chicane up on his lap by 0.4 of a second, losing some time out of the final corner up towards the timing line. What is it going to be for Marek Shins? It's 15th. Has enough time for 2 more laps if he gets a move on around this circuit, but it's not looking particularly great for the championship leaders. As it stands, they're half a second off getting into Super Bowl.
Yeah, you would think that the 191 now, the beads of sweat starting to show. You said you've got two more laps. If you do not have any problems, you don't get hauled up at anything. And speaking of people who were looking like they were running out of time out of Super Bowl, the 333 has improved all the way up to 6th position, 0.3 off the overall pace and second in silver class so far.
Ismael Lebreck then up into the top 10, and that's what the Triple R team will like to see, and they'll be hoping for a masterclass performance from Ismael Lebreck in Super Bowl like they had at Monza to see if he can find that car up towards the front of the grid. Here is the 777, the sister car to your team, and Tom Pottage at this point in time. Do you think they'll be happy at this point, you know, with 7th place? I mean, getting into Super Bowl is a big thing anyway for a lot of the silver teams, but do you think they'll be happy with this performance?
I'd say so. I mean, they should especially be happy, really. They've shown great pace all season. As I said, sometimes just getting caught up in some accidents, but hey, this is how endurance racing works. They've always made the best of the bad and continued on. I mean, one of the drivers in that, Sebastian Brunier, his motto and his team name is always "to the checkered, no matter what." And I think that's a good motto to live by.
Definitely so. Martin Schumacher then in 9th place. A bit nervous now for the BMW team as to whether they can get into the top 10. By the way, Marek Shins has come and crossed the line, has improved on his time, but not enough to get them into the top 10. The timer has officially run out. Martin Schumacher goes up to 5th in the BMW. That should solidify their place into the Super Bowl session. But it's going to be touch and go now for the rest of these cars. It's 0.4 of a second for Marek Shins to make up on a lap to get the 191 into Super Bowl. If not, they'll be starting around 15th on the grid. And that would be a massive boost for the PCDC Motorsport team that have to chase them down. Have to chase them down in the championship. Have to get past them. We'll show you the points in just a few moments after the qualifying session is done. But I tell you what, it's getting nervy out there. The final couple of cars coming around now to finish up their laps. This is Joe Mccauley in the 899, currently sitting in 4th place. Joe Mccauley is up on his lap time at the moment. Is he going to put his car any further up the order? Is he going to put himself into a better position for the Super Pole? Yes, he will, up into third overall in qualifying, and that is a job well done from Joe Macaulay.
Yeah, now looking back down the field, some of the last people to cross the line. Cody Pride for the PPR Esports Porsche. Once again, hoping just to try get a little bit more safety for Super Pole in ninth. Luckily, pretty much everyone behind him has finished, unless Marek Shins just has the lap of the gods. But coming down to the line for the last time in the Porsche, will it be an improvement? And it will not on that lap. In fact, tell a lie, it will. A 59.583. And Marek Shins, the 191, does not improve up to the P10. Marek Shins out of Super Pole.
Well, if it couldn't get any more dramatic for in a week's time for the race, the 191 arrived late for Super Pole, well, arrived late for qualifying rather, and well, with only 10 minutes left of the session, could not find a lap capable of getting themselves into the top 10. And they will miss out on the Super Pole session. They will start 15th. But here is the order then. Vincent Erbridge for PCDC Motorsports. They will take the top honours in the 30-minute qualifying session, but only by 0.06 of a second to Matthias Egger, Joe Mccauley and Maximilian Wilmoth in third and fourth, Martin Schumacher and Malinowski in fifth and sixth, Ismael Lebreck, Tom Pottage in seventh and eighth, and Cody Pride and Daniel Ferrier for PPR Esports and Pink Performance. They all make it through into the Super Pole session. The rest of the order, well, it's Darren King in the 38, Milton Steele-Vasson in the 962, Akos Getfan in the 194, and then it's Andre Franke for the 123. I think that car was driven by Gergo Panker at the time, though. Then Marek Shins, of course, for the 191, the big outlier in this situation. Then we got Samuel Chumley in the 252, Cardinale, Williams, Muthen, Geider, and then I believe it was Bart Matcher rounding out. Oh, no, Schwencek and Bart Matcher rounding out the 22 cars attending qualifying here today. In the top 10, covered by just over 0.4 of a second. Pretty close. And a lot of different manufacturers in the top 10.
A lot of different manufacturers. And also, if you look, not one person held the purple sector for anything. We have Vincent Erbridge and at McLaren, an absolute monster in those high downforce scenarios for that McLaren, what you can use, having the purple first. The BMW having the purple second sector, which a lot of that is the run up to Spoon and the run down the back straight, just using that straight line speed of that car that it's got. And Daniel Ferrier and Pelfit, the 25, they've got the purple for the last sector, just about managing to keep that Audi pointed in the right direction and really use the pointy front that thing's got to get them the purple sector for the last. But what this means in racing is that all of these cars, there'll just be so many great battles because there's not one team who's better over an entire lap.
Yeah, and that's going to be one of the big things for these guys to look out for. But before we do have a look at the Super Pole, and we'll have a look and see who we think is going to be going over into, well, the final pole position spot for the season. We did say we would have a little bit of look at the championship standings and the points so far this season, and we'll be able to show you guys exactly where everyone stands at this point in time in the World Tour. So here we go then, the 191 team. We did mention that they were the championship leaders and leading by 110 points to PCDC Motorsports, but considering the point structure that we have here, that could all be turned on its head. If PCDC Motorsports pick up pole position here today, they'll get a nice batch of points. And of course, with the 191 finishing qualifying down in 15th place, that really does put PCDC in a very, very good position if they have a good Super Pole here. Then in third, it's the CDA NOP team. They're quite far back. No chance of the championship for them. They're going to be looking to solidify that third place. Contesting them will be the FFS Racing team, who didn't get through into Super Pole for this one. They're 50 points behind them. Bit further back, the Ryan Race team, they're just kind of competing for as many points, see if they can gain any more positions at this point in time in the championship. The second Racing Line Motorsport team, another Bentley, in the top 10 is quite a few points behind. And as we move on to the next couple of pages, we'll see some of the other pro drivers. Quite a few of these missing here today. Team Zero Bad Luck is one of those not here today. H3 Racing, I don't believe, are here today. Neither are Like and Subscribe team. The Renwelton Pro team, of course, they pulled out. Darren King's Dorking Community team is here for the race and for Super Pole. And we can also see your team there, Ryan, down in 18th place in the pro class. The 199 team not having the best World Tour so far. And speaking of not having the best World Tour, the 95 Side Max Motorworks team, which I don't think is present here today either. Last couple of pro teams, and all these are signed out of the series already. Graphics Engineering, THR Esports, ODB Racing, and TFC ART Esports. None of these making it to the end of the season, which is a shame to see, but here are the silver drivers. So Milton Steele-Vasson's team leads the way for the 962, but GC Racing number 1 in the BMW, they are chasing them down. And those positions can still change before the checkered flag. In a week's time, Connection Loss Racing with 902 points in third place. XL Racing by Renwelton doing well as well, but they've got the Butler Power Motorsport 556 team in behind them. Open Visor Racing 777 in 6th, followed by PPR, Triple R, Cryonics Racing, and the Jardiette Community Team 2. Number 84 car, which did fail to get through to the Super Pole session here today. Next is the 2SRL Esports Team Red, followed by GC Racing 2. OTL Racing not here today, and Green Lofthouse Engineering, I believe, were here today. PC East Motorsports second team not here today. Same for 300 Ping Motorsports, Sims and Riggs, and the Butler Powell 505 team, which signed out much earlier in the season. But those are the championship standings. Still quite a bit to play for some of these teams, and both of the championships, the Pro and the Silver class, undecided at this point in time, and that's exactly how we like to see it. And as we return momentarily to live pictures, the first car is out on track for their outlap of the Super Pole session. And it's going to be Phil Vitt in the number 25 Audi.
Yeah, Phil Vitt going to lay down the gauntlet for the Super Pole. And as you said, it's sometimes just the worst feeling. You know that everyone has got eyes on you, what you're doing, what the lap time may be, and people will adjust their pace accordingly. So it is so difficult, especially in that Audi. You've now got one shot at this. And the Audi historically can be quite the twitchy car. It is not one that suffers fools greatly. And you have one tiny little wobble, one touch of the curb, which we've seen even Malinowski do. It will spit you off, and that will be your Super Pole over. But coming down to the back straight, you've got to put all of these thoughts in the back of your head. You know what you have to do, and you have to drive that car to the line.
And forgive the mistake just a moment ago. I just say it was Phil Vitt. The timing board was showing Phil Vitt in the car, but it's actually Daniel Ferrier who will be doing the Super Pole lap here for the Pink Performance number 25. But here we go then, the first lap of the Super Pole session. It will be set by the car that finished in 10th in the qualifying session. Nice wide run out of the final corner up towards the timing line. And here we go for the Pink Performance team. Down towards the first corner, aptly named here. First couple of corners here at Suzuka. Keep the car tight on the inside, maximize the exit here, but do be careful of the curbs. Don't want to unstabilize the car too much. Then into the Snake S's he will go. We'll try to carry third gear through as much of this as you can. May need to shift down to second momentarily for the second part of the S's, and then up into the Dunlop curves. Want to maximize the exit that you have here, but don't run too wide, as you'll easily invalidate your lap, or, well, just get caught on the grass and your lap will basically be aborted. Into the Degners then we go, and another two corners you have to be super committed on and super wide on the exit as well for Daniel Ferrier, but keeping it within the limits. The important part is to not invalidate your lap out here in the Super Pole session. Goes through the hairpin using that wide line that Ryan Mawson alluded to earlier, seeing a couple of drivers favouring that wide line to get a nice run out towards Spoon Curve. And then, speaking of Spoon Curve, it can easily be binned here, but needs to keep it nice and tight to the inside. Doesn't go too wide in the middle part of the corner. How wide will he go? Very wide on the exit of Spoon Curve. Onto the back straight now, just a few corners to go for Daniel Ferrier, the famous 130R coming up. We've seen a couple of drivers mess this corner up in qualifying. Will Daniel Ferrier get it planted through there in Super Pole? Yes, he does. Doesn't invalidate the time either. Looking good as he comes down towards the Casio triangle. Very, very committed on the inside of both of those corners. And then tight up towards the wall and across towards the line. So the first lap of the Super Pole session for Daniel Ferrier, what's it going to be? 1:59.745. So that is the benchmark for everyone to beat.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, here it is, Cody Pride in the PPR Esports, the #1 Porsche, knows now what the time is to beat. And as he says, the time's just a little bit slower in Super Pole because you just have to be that much more careful. And it is very much a risk versus reward. And here we go for the Porsche through turn 1, balancing the car on the throttle. You can see taking that double apex, running as wide as you dare, and into the S's now. A place where the Porsche really comes alive. You can use the balance of this car. The rear engine ability is just so pointy, but that can also come undone for you. The Porsche is very pointy, and well, if you point it in the wrong direction, it will go there. And Cody Pride expertly going through there, slightly wide out of Dunlop. A scary line, but it can often be a lot faster. And now is the Degners, a place where it can really come undone, using as much as he dares over that curb. You can see the car leaping across the sausage curbs there, trying to get the anti-cut, but I'm pretty sure a lot of drivers will still cut it. Up to the hairpin. Another great place for the Porsche. Immense traction out of corners with that rear engine. It's a lot of people say that the engine on this car is in the wrong place, and well, that's a matter of opinion sometimes, isn't it? Depending on how you see it. Up to Spoon Corner, a long double apex, very blind as well the second half of this, and you have to be careful because if you super late apex the second half, you can run wide here, but not to be. And now down the back straight, the screaming flat 6 of that Porsche. You got to really ring it out, give everything that this engine has, because you don't have much in a straight line. Through 130R, a light lift, but still incredibly planted under the Yokohama Bridge and up to the Triangle Chicane. Super committed over those curbs. That is as much as you dare take without invalidating it. And tight to the wall just to shave off those, hundreds of thousands that we were talking about. And up to the line, that will be a 1:59.904 for the Porsche. About a tenth and a half off the pace.
So Cody Pride for PPR Esports sets down his lap time, and that'll be one for the silver drivers to check out. That'll be their benchmark to beat. And speaking of one of the silver teams, Tom Pottage in the 777 for the OVRC team. Their McLaren is out on the track and going around for their flying lap at this point in time. So 1:59.7 is the overall time to beat so far. I did check that lap from Daniel Ferrier was only about a tenth slower than what they achieved in the qualifying session. And I have to say, that's quite impressive to be able to go back out there and in one lap get within a tenth of a second to where you were in the qualifying session. And I imagine that the Peak Performance team won't be dissatisfied with that lap time on the board.
Oh, no, absolutely. And as you said, so far, it hasn't been beaten. That is, unless the 777 can do anything about it. Silver class, so he's basically got his sights set on Pride. But those McLarens did look really, really strong in qualifying. It's just, it depends on how safe your car is. Some of these cars, you know, like the Porsche and the Audis, are a little bit more scary when you get them to the limit, and that might just hold the drivers back from going that absolute 10 tenths. But the McLaren, as it says, very good downforce car, and a lot of the 777 really get on with this car, I've noticed, especially Sebastian Brunier. He really gels with this thing. So definitely one to watch in the race. I mean, as you said, if you gel with a car, it's just that. And we'll see what they can do through 130R. A little bit of a touch of the inside curb that doesn't run them too wide. And now it's just a mad dash to the line. What can they do? Can they knock the number 1 Porsche off the silver point? Can they knock the 25 Audi off provisional pole? Well, we'll find out as they race towards that timing line.
And I was about to say, if my timing sheet hasn't deceived me, Ryan, that lap was invalid.
That it was.
And that is further backed up by the fact that Tom Pottage has completed the lap and does not have a time on the board. So at some point throughout that lap, Tom Pottage has invalidated the lap. And, well, that will relegate them to 10th place, barring anyone else invalidating their lap. So unfortunate there for the OVRC team. Getting into the top 10 shootout for Super Pole and then just invalidating the lap. But it's so easy to do around here, as the next competitor in the silver class is Ismael Lebreck. And, well, the Canadian has had some pretty good performances in Super Pole so far this season, but what can he do around Suzuka in the McLaren?
As he says, you got to turn the heat up here. They're hoping for a great showing from Ismael Lebreck. We've seen it before. But can he pull it off again? But now you know, with one car already having an invalid lap, the worst you are going to start is 9th, so long as you set any kind of valid time now. And I know a couple of teams will be thinking that. It just takes a tiny bit of pressure off. And Ismael Lebreck going wide, and that is an aborted lap.
Oh dear, Ismael Lebreck not able to keep the car on the circuit and invalidating it through the Dunlop curve. We just received information from Seb Brunier in the chat that Tom Pottage invalidated it in the Degners, which is a very, very easy place to invalidate your lap. And Ismael Lebreck just invalidating the Triple R car's lap at the Dunlop curve just before the Degners. So, unfortunate for both of these cars, the 333 and the 777, both of them invalid laps for the final Super Pole session of the season. And I can imagine the frustration with Ismael Lebreck, especially because, you know, despite being amongst the silver class cars, that car had immense pace in the qualifying session. And they would have been my pick for silver class pole.
Yeah, the McLarens, it says, they were just looking amazing in qualifying. And, well, I would have had to tell them to slow down a little bit with the front end of that car glowing. But, yeah, Ismael Lebreck not giving a valid lap time, going off at Dunlop, and that will be it. You can see the frustration. He just wants to get back to the pits and be done with it. I think we'll see that truck and that team leave incredibly quickly in a cloud of dust. But now it's time for the 96, the Side Max Motorworks car with Malinowski behind the wheel. Second Audi out on track. He's now essentially got his sights on the 25, matched machinery. It's Audi versus Audi, and, well, can Malinowski take it?
Well, with 4 of 10 cars having gone out already and completed their laps, we only have 2 times on the board. A bit unusual for a Super Bowl session, but we'll take it as we do. And here is the number 96, Malinowski at the wheel there for Side Max Motorworks. Of course, one of the, should we say, elite teams in modern times for ACC. Of course, there are some teams that everyone has known around for the last 2 years in ACC in some of the top class of racing, especially in endurance races. Racing Line Motorsport being one of those particular teams. But I think Side Max Motorworks, they're definitely throwing themselves out there as one of the new top dogs. I mean, this team in particular the number 96 with this car have won 3 24-hour of Kyalami events in ACC, and they weren't doing too bad in SimGrid's 24-hour of Spa, I believe it was, until an internet disconnect for one of their drivers. So they're particularly talented at these long endurance races, and well, Malinowski is very, very good at qualifying as well. Saw him take pole position in one of those 24-hour races that they ended up winning, and going to be looking to try and do the same thing here. There's going to be a few other contenders for that spot of pole position, but it's not looking too bad for the 96 so far.
No, exactly. Very clean lap so far. Just keeping it between the lines. Obviously, you've seen the other teams invalidate the laps, and they will know that you just got to keep it downshift through 130R. You can hear the V10 screaming in anguish, but keeps it nice and planted up to the final triangle chicane. Nice and committed over the curbs. And what will it be? This is now what we think might be a pole time. It's Audi versus Audi, and coming up to the line, it shall be, there you go, a 159.733, but that is only 12 thousandths of a second quicker.
Well, Malinowski comes out big time for the Sidemax Motorworks team, puts that car provisionally, at least, in pole position. But now it's the time for Martin Schumacher to head out there on the circuit and see what the BMW can do on one lap pace. The 411, of course, they're contenders for the championship in the silver class, and of course they'll be looking to get one over on the 962 team, which of course didn't qualify for Super Pole, so any lap time that they can put in around here will see them starting ahead of their championship rivals. But of course, they want to get that pole in the silver class, and their target right now will be Cody Pride, a 159.904. And I don't want to use the commentator's curse, but I reckon that car can do that on one lap.
I would say so. The BMW has an added bonus of where a lot of people, their time is you have to maximize through the corners. You're analyzing corners, and every single time you are wanting to get just that little bit extra. The BMW's party trick is if you can get this car actually hooked up and planted, get the traction control working for you, it is just an absolute rocket ship. I mean, we can see it coming up to Spoon Corner. Look at the speed of this car. The turbo V8 is just an immense thing. And when you're racing, if you see a BMW behind you and you're coming up onto a straight, you can just kiss your position goodbye, because it will munch you. And coming down the back straight, this is sort of where we'd seen this team have their purple sector, was Sector 2. So where we've just seen the Degners, the Hairpin, and Spoon Corner, they were fastest. And now through 130R, got to keep that massive boat on the road. Expertly done by Martin Schumacher. And then up to the line. Cody Pride is the target. Silver class pole. What can the 411 do?
Martin Schumacher uses as much of the power he has underneath that BMW on the straight, powers it up towards the line. What will it be for Martin Schumacher? It won't be a silver class pole. It's a 2-minute 0.060. Doesn't manage to beat Cody Pride, a tenth and a half just over down on the Porsche. But it's second place provisionally in the silver class on the grid, and they should be happy with that. But the remaining silver class driver to go out there and finish a flying lap will be Maximilian Wilmoth for the XL Racing by Renwelton team. And this is another one of those teams that has done particularly well in the Endurance World Tour, and lately in some of the RCI events as well. They've been particularly good results by the likes of Felix Ruppert and Maximilian Wilmoth. So we'll have to see what Wilmoth can do here. And the Aston Martin, of course, you mentioned it, Ryan, at one point in time was definitely one of the fastest cars around here, and I think it is probably still the most popular endurance car on the grid.
Oh, absolutely. For endurance, really, if you want a car that's safe, nice to drive, has good pace, it's it doesn't chew tires. It's very good on the fuel. It's brilliant in the wet with that TC2 system that it's got. It's basically the Aston Martin, but it does have its downsides. It has a little bit of understeer, and the turbo lag is immense on this car. It has been lightly adjusted at a few tracks, such as Monza in some of the recent updates, but for such corners like that hairpin that we've just gone through, you turn in, you plant your foot, and you can just count the delay before the car actually gets up and goes. But I've seen plenty of drivers manage to drive around this, and even on starts, there are some Aston Martins that can really launch it off. So if you can deal with that, then the Aston Martin is probably the car for you.
Yeah, definitely a very comfortable car. Can speak from experience of having driven one in the CHSR Endurance Championship last year. And despite some of its odd quirks, it was very, very pleasant to drive, but just a bit dull for my taste, I would think. But Maximilian Wilmoth and the XL Racing team by Ren Welton, they've done a fantastic job in this car all season long. And coming up towards the timing line, look at that, 57 thousandths off of the overall pole position, and it's going to be silver class pole for Maximilian Wilmoth and the number 16, the XL Racing by Ren Welton car. They will take the final pole position spot for the silver class, and I'm sure that will be a nice cherry on top for their season, finishing in a week's time. But the next car up is Joe Mccauley in the 899 Bentley, and this is one of our contenders for pole, so let's see what the Scotsman can do.
Yeah, we've seen both of these, the Bentleys of the 899 and the 126 of Barazzini, battling it out in qualifying. And this car, once again, I have a feeling it might be quite a good one-lap pace car. It does have quite a lot of downforce to speak of, and for the 899, for Joe Macaulay, these people drive these Bentleys so often, they just know what to do with these cars. They know how to drive them, and I'm expecting a very good time. But you've got to still get around it through Degner 1. Look how much curb you can cut the Bentley. It's just, the curbs are basically non-existent with this, how soft it is over the curbs. It is a car that loves munching them, much more so than, say, your Porsches and your Audis. Through the hairpin, a little bit of the wide line going on to get the traction down with that twin-turbo V8 and the run up to Spoon Corner.
Yep, so Joe Mccauley, very committed on his lap time, and we've just received some information that the Triple R car will be P10, as they have forfeited the car from the Super Pole session. So despite the fact that Tom Pottage had gone out and invalidated their lap first, it will mean that they will start ahead of the 333 car, as the 333 has forfeited its entry from the session. So that's a shame to hear for the Triple R car. But for the 899, Coach Dave Academy nearly on pace team, up towards the turning line for Joe Mccauley, had a very, very strong Super Pole out at Kyalami, and now up towards the timing line. What will it be for Joe Mccauley? It's provisional pole, and by 2 thousandths of a second as well, 1:59.5. And Joe Mccauley, well, he really has slapped the gauntlet down for Matthias Egger and Vincent Erbrich to come in the session. Says, well, boys, you got to go and beat that now.
Yeah, 2 tenths above the 96 of Malinowski. And now, like you said, Matthias Egger for the Orion race team, they know now what they have to be. It's Bentley versus Bentley. Setups and drivers is now all that this comes down to. And what will it be for Matthias Egger? We have seen sometimes this team in Superpole, when you put them under pressure, they perform immensely. It's some of the teams, like when you've been watching these people racing, there is one that I will always remember. This team lapped us at Bathurst, and we were also in a Bentley. I briefly, for one point, thought, wow, look, I'm keeping up with Matthias Egger. And what that was traffic. He got around them, and he immediately just disappeared into the sunset, which meant that he was beating my best lap times in traffic when I was on a clear track. And it's just, these are otherworldly type drivers. Anyone who's up at this level, you watch them drive and you just think, how do you manage to get this time and this amount out of these cars? When you think there's nothing left to give, they find another 10% for you.
Yeah, and the fact is they've done it in different cars as well. I've seen them do particularly well in a Lamborghini, in a Mercedes, and now in a Bentley as well. And these guys, they have shifted between cars, a couple of times for endurance races, but it doesn't matter what they drive. They find themselves at the front, and they hold the record, in fact, for the most podiums across all RCI endurance races, and that's nothing to nothing to be ashamed of. It's a fantastic record that they've got. They haven't won too many races, but they have won both of our Bathurst 12-hour races, so something to say there about how much these boys love Bathurst, and maybe we'll see Bathurst on the calendar next year for the RCI Endurance World Tour. But here comes Matthias Egger up towards the timing line, going to hug the wall and shorten the sprint to the line. Here we go then. What will it be? Up towards the timing line and beaten. It's a 1:59.508 from Matthias Egger. Joe Mccauley beaten back off of provisional pole by 18 thousandths of a second.
And now the last runner, the person who's got it all to prove and was our pole setter in the original qualifying, PCDC Motorsports, Vincent Erbridge in the number 12 McLaren. And well, every single time we have an event like this, you can always guarantee one thing, that there will be Vincent Erbridge somewhere pretty much at pole position. It is McLaren. Seen immense things from this, especially at the likes of Silverstone, and just throughout the season, immense speed with this car. And he's now got it to prove one last time.
Well, Vincent Erbridge making his way around the circuit. He knows the lap time to beat. He sees it up there on the board. He's seen what Matthias Egger is capable of doing, and now he has to try and go out and beat it. Of course, pole position would be the ideal situation for PCDC Motorsports, as they're chasing down the championship leaders, Racing Line Motorsport, who didn't make it through to Super Pole. That's going to be the big news, no matter who takes pole position here today. I guess the biggest shock of the Invitational split is going to be the championship leader starting in 15th next week, and what a talking point that will be for the start of the race. But here is Vincent Erbridge coming towards Spoon Corner, still on a valid lap, and looking pretty good at the moment as well. And, well, here we go then. The sprint that he has coming down through the second sector will be heading into the final sector just before 1:30R. And how much can this McLaren get out? The McLarens haven't done well in the Super Pole session so far. Both of them that we've seen prior have invalidated their laps, but not so for Vincent Erbridge at this point in time. Cuts so much of the chicane and has to run really, really tight onto the exit curve of the chicane, runs really tight to the wall as well, just like we saw Cody Pride doing earlier on. Here we go, up towards the timing line. Will it be pole? No, it won't. It's 6th for the title challengers. 6th place is the best that they can do for the Super Pole session. And I have to say, Ryan, I'm quite surprised at that.
Yeah, and with both other McLarens having invalidated laps, I'm just guessing that the McLaren takes time to get to its optimum pace, and maybe the over one lap where you haven't got necessarily time to get all the tires heated up evenly as much as you want. You haven't got time to get the optimum fuel load and everything sort of happy. Then the McLarens just struggle. We saw a couple of moments there where Vincent Erbridge was either had run wide a little bit or a slight wobble. And those are all the just micro mistakes that cost you this lap times when it is so close. I mean, like I said, top 8 separated by half a second, and going up the board, P1, P2, 18 hundredths, 18 thousandths even apart. It's just such a high level of competition. So a sad day for PCDC. 6th is nothing to shake a stick at, but they just now got to think, what could it have been for the last go around? But for Matthias Egger in that 126, it's a time to celebrate, I think.
Yeah, and for the 191 crew that didn't make it through to Super Pole, it will be a sigh of relief from them that the number 12 didn't pick up any points for pole position today to close that gap before the race has even started. But here is the order as we will see it. Matthias Egger does take pole position for Orion race team, but only by 18 thousandths of a second to Joe Mccauley. Then a bit of a gap back, we have Malinowski in the Audi. So it's Bentley on the front row, Audi on the second row. Then we have Maximilian Wilmoth in 5th place, the highest of the silver class cars. Vincent Erbrich, of course, the title challengers for Pro Class in 6th. Cody Pride and the BMW of Martin Schumacher will line up 7th and 8th. And then, of course, the 2 McLarens that did not set a valid lap in the session. Tom Pottish for the 777, and then the 333 car of Triple R will start 10th. So that brings an end to quite an interesting qualifying and quite an interesting Super Pole as well. And I'm sure we'll have plenty of talking points about this Super Pole session in the week leading up to the race, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was just such a phenomenal Super Pole to watch. Like I said, the title leaders, the big news, the Ferrari not getting in to Super Pole, just perhaps turning up a little bit too late, a little bit too little too late there. And for everyone else, that will be their time to shine. And yeah, PCDC Motorsports not getting the pole position, just having that slight bad run in the Super Pole. And like I said, still interesting to see everyone before we cut the screen there. There was everyone who had different purple sectors again. And I still think that the race for this is going to be phenomenal. There's so many different manufacturers in the top half of this field. There's going to be difference in drivers, difference in cars, and you've got that for 10 hours.
Yeah, the race in a week's time is definitely going to be one to watch out for. But if you've enjoyed what you've seen here today, of course, do leave a like and subscribe. It really does help us around here. And of course, stick around for some more action here on RCI TV. I did mention it earlier, but on Monday, the Euro Masters begins with round 1 at Imola, 2 40-minute sprint races to start the season. Then moving on Wednesday, we have round 4, I believe it is, of the Diamond Drive Cup. And of course, will be super exciting to see how all of that continues onwards as well. Then on Thursday, we have round 3 of the GT4 Championship. And then on Friday, of course, we have, I believe, round 7 now of the GT3 World Championship that we are running. Night Owl should be resuming shortly in just a couple of weeks' time. And then, of course, on next Saturday, we do have the final round here of the Endurance World Tour. So do make sure to check out all of those streams in the week. And of course, we look forward to seeing all of you guys for next week's race here. 10 hours of Suzuka. And of course, we'll have more information to follow in the midweek as well. Big thank you to Race Department, AK Informatica, Raceface Speed Labs, and Sim Racing GP for, of course, helping make everything here at RCI happen. But that's been it from Ryan Mawson and Ryan Gill, myself, and of course, Nick Setnick behind the cameras, who's done a fantastic job here today. We look forward to seeing you later on in the week, but enjoy the rest of your weekend either way.